All right, everybody. So this is week 6, and what are we going to be doing? Well, if we take a look at the page right now, what we can see is that we've got a lecture today on Tuesday. We have a lecture on Thursday. We're going to be doing as many exercises as we can, but actually we'll have more lecture on Thursday as well. We have like a new topic to cover, and then I have your assignments linked down here like usual. So if you do look at week 6, which I'm trying to jump to, I got a lot of stuff up here. Zoom is in the way. I just closed the thing that I want to look at. Try again. If we look at week 6, and I'll just back out so we can see what's in there. We got 6 sections in here, and I just moved a couple from week 7 to week 6 to make sure we get to them. And so originally week 6 was just these first three sections here, strings and debugging and style guidelines, which was almost nothing. And I wanted to split up the next topic a little bit. And so we will be going over if statements on Thursday this week. So that's an important lecture. So make sure you take a look at the week 6 lecture 2. And we're going to be learning how to do these last 3 sections. Now, don't get too worried, I guess, about these sections. Notice the ones say general on it. 6.4 and 6.6 say general. And when Zybook says general, what that means is it's not Java. So they're going to explain to you what it means to be an if statement, basically. So there'll be like animations to look at and pictures to look at, and so on. But you're not even really typing code in there, not real code. So, um, they're not so bad, is what I'm saying. Nevertheless, we have these sections for week 6. So today we're only going to cover strings, and maybe we'll take a look at the stuff in 6.2 and 6.3 if we have time. All right. So with that said, let's get going. So what we'll need in order to do lecture 1 is this set of lecture slides, string and characters, and we'll open them up. So let's see what's in here. So this is just a quick set of lecture slides. It's not very long, but it'll give us all the ideas that we need, which will make the Zybooks hopefully easier to understand. So what are we learning? Strings, characters, and input. So what is a string? So a string is a sequence of characters. So like a word is a string. A sentence is a string, right? Like all the text in the sentence you could put into a string if you wanted to. That's what a string is. Okay. Now it is important to understand how they are represented in Java. So strings are objects. Specifically, there's a class um, called string, and that's where all the functions that we can do with text are stored. They're not a primitive type. And you can tell it's not a primitive type because remember when we were learning about primitive types, might have to open Eclipse here. Remember that when we were learning about um, primitive types, all of the primitive types start with lowercase letters like this, like char, lowercase. That's a character, and it's a primitive type because it starts with a lowercase. Int, that's another one. That's another um, primitive type. But when you make a string, you'll say string, my string, like that. And you'll notice that it starts with an uppercase S, and the color coding will be different. So the uppercase is telling you that it's a class and not a primitive type. All right, where are the picture here? Okay. So they're not primitive types, and when we're typing them in, you want to be able to type in a string using double quotes. So that's just the regular quote symbol. You cannot use single quotes for a string, right? Now, a character is a primitive type. A, a blah, 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 words, hard. A character can only store a single character. So that's a letter, it's a digit, it's a symbol on your keyboard. The space key is also uh, a character, a tab is a character. Most anything on your keyboard that you could type is going to be a character. Now, internally in Java, they're going to be 16-bit Unicode values, which I think we talked a little bit about last time. Now, they are declared with single quotes. This is kind of badly spaced here. That's not a double quote, that's two single quotes. So look at the example. That's the right way to see it. So, for example, character grade A, single quotes. So you have to know that to type them in. You can't type strings as if they were characters, and you can't type characters as if they were strings. So if I make a character here called like my CHAR, and I want to put like a capital A in it, that's the right way to do it. If I want to make a string with a capital A in it, that's the right way to do it. So if I were to run this right now, this code would run. I guess you wouldn't be able to see anything. So let's put a print statement just to see. So we'll just print my char plus, we'll do a space, and then we'll do my string like that. And if I run this, we can just get AA because they're both A. Now, if you try to change the way that we've typed them in, if you try to do double quotes on the character, you can see that there's going to be an error. And if I run it, you'll see that. So it's not going to let me. But if I try, type mismatch, can't convert string to character. So it's telling me that the left-hand side here is a character, but the right-hand side is a string, and that's no good. So you got to use single quotes for character. Now for string, you have to use double quotes. So, my code runs the way that it's written now because the string is double quotes. If I tried to change it to make it single quotes, we will get another error. Cannot convert from character to string. So that's the same error as before, just with the character and string words reversed, right? So you have to type them incorrectly. So strings have to be double quotes. Now, also a string can be more than one letter, right? So ABC is perfectly fine for a string, right? ABC. But you cannot put, ABC as a character. That doesn't make sense because character is one letter only, one symbol on the keyboard only, one thing only. All right. So that's the basic idea. Let's find our presentation. This is going to say what we just said. So for string literals, now you're going to see this word in SciBooks, literal. And when it's saying a literal, that means you're the one, like when you're typing it in your code. So when you're typing a string in your code, literally you're typing it, uh, you use double quotes. And for a character literal, you use single quotes. Okay. Also, strings can hold multiple characters. Character holds one, right? So we know that. We've just seen that, right? Now, the next thing we want to know how to do is we need the user to type these in. And so the way you would do that is there's a method in the scanner class called next. Now, we're used to doing next int, next double to read in, an integer or a double. But when you're reading a word, it's not like next word or anything like that. It's just next. So next with nothing after the next, I mean, except the parentheses, it reads the next, it says token here, but the next word. And it says up to white space. Now, the other thing they do in this section is they're going to explain the concept of white space in Zybooks. But what white space is it's going to be any kind of space. So like going back over to Eclipse here, if you have spaces here like this, these spaces are white space. If you can add some in here, these spaces are white space. Spaces are white space. Tabs are white space. New lines are white space. Anything that's kind of not actual visible symbols, but still stuff that could be typed, that stuff is white space. They'll explain it better in Zybooks than what I've just done. But for now, just think of white spaces like spaces and tabs and things. Okay. Now, in order to use scanner.next, you would declare your string, like string word equals scnr next, and that will read one word in from the keyboard, and it stops when it hits white space, like a space. Okay. Now, the other method you could use would be scanner.next line. So next versus next line. Next line will read an entire line, including all of the spaces. And it's really easy to see this. If I come back over to Eclipse and let's just try this. So let's just print out my string. We'll see what it is. And instead of typing it in up here as a string literal, we'll use scnr dot next like that. So what this code does now, we don't need the character. What this code does now is it reads one line in from the keyboard and then it reads one word in from the keyboard and it prints out the word to see what it is. So if I run this, I'll click down here. So let me just type my name, Greg Hogan, and it says Greg. So why does it say Greg? Because this function, scnr.next, reads one word. So it started reading the GERG, and then it hit a space character, which is white space, so it stopped. So it just read Greg and stopped. Um, so that's what we got. Now, if I tried to do other things here, like if I put a bunch of spaces and then I type my name, guess what? I still just get Greg. It ignored all of that beginning white space. Now, if I try to do the other way around, if I try to type in my name, Greg, and then I put a bunch of spaces after it, I also just get Greg. Okay? So that's what next does, is it reads one word. So if I wanted to read two words, I would have to do this twice. So like my string one and my string two, for example. And then if I print them out, I'll print them out on separate lines. So if I did this, now if I run it and I type in my name, now I get both of them. So my string one is going to be Greg and my string two is going to be Hogan. So one word at a time, that's what next does. Also, just to show you again about the white space, if I put a bunch of spaces, Greg, bunch of spaces, Hogan, bunch of spaces, we still just get Greg Hogan. Spaces are just kind of, they're going to disappear if you're using scnr.next. There you go. Now, what does next line do differently? Well, let's get rid of this second one here and let's find out. So if I do next line, that reads an entire line of text at once. And so I'll run it. I'll type in Greg Hogan and look. So my entire name, first and last, Greg Hogan, ended up in this string. So the space did not stop it this time. And there's repercussions of that because I can do run and then I can put spaces, Greg, spaces, Hogan, spaces, enter, and look, it came up exactly the same. So actually all of this text here, however much there is, that all was stored inside of this one string, my string. So next line will read an entire line, including all of the spaces and everything else. Okay, let's go back to, I can never find it since the icon changed. There we go. So you can read a line or you can read a word. Now, something that they're going to make a point of in the Zybooks is how the white space affects the input behavior. So next stops at the first space and it only captures one word. So if you type hello world and you do next, you're only going to get the word hello, right? Because it stopped right there. Next line reads the entire word, including spaces. And then it says pitfall. After next, a leftover new line may cause next line to return an empty string. Now, this pitfall here, it says exactly what it means. After next, a leftover new line may cause next line to return an empty string, and that may be confusing to you. So I will try to show you. Let's go here. Let's read two strings, and then let's print them out. We're going to print them out on separate lines like this. And let's run this first. And I'm going to say, hello there. I'm Greg. Right? So the first string was hello there. The second string was I'm Greg. Right? Everything worked fine. Um, Now, what if I do this? Hello, enter. I'm Greg, enter. Of course, that works fine as well. But what if I do this? Next. And I'm going to type in the same thing. Hello, and then I'm Greg. Hello. Uh-oh. Look, that's the entire program. We never did this. Well, it seems like we never did this. And so the thing is that when you type hello and then you hit enter, there's an enter at the end of the hello. So it's like it's hard to explain. I'm gonna just type here where I can type something. So imagine so when you type hello, you're not really just typing in hello. There's hello and then there's like an enter, right? You hit enter at the end. And then what happens is when you run scnr.next, what happens is it eats the hello. So you're going to end up with the hello is going to be ending up in my string. So it gets the hello part. Okay. So what's left in the line is what? Just enter. So like you pressing enter is still left. Nobody's read that yet. And so when you run this line, my string two equals scnr next line, is it tries to read the rest of this line. But the rest of this line is just enter. So scnr dot next line reads the enter, and that's the end of the line. So we get a blank line. So when you do a next and then a next line, basically the next line is just going to be you pressing enter and nothing gets returned. Well, an empty string gets returned. So it looks like this line didn't do anything, but it did. It just made an empty line. That's all it did. Um, that's a little bit confusing, like why that happens. It's easy to have it happen like accidentally, right? So that's just why they want you to be aware of it. And let's go ahead and jump into like the 6.1 exercises and we'll just see the stuff that we just looked at. So they're going to explain you what strings are. I'm not going to go through this slowly. So like if you type in Julia, it ends up every character is in its own space in memory. Okay. Which of these are string literals? So remember, you type in string literals with double quotes. That's what you have to remember. So is that a string literal? Yes. Is that a string literal? Double quotes. Yes. Is that a string literal? No. Right? No quotes. Is that a string literal? Yes. Double quotes. Is that a string literal? No. Single quotes are for characters. This is no good. Double quotes. Yes. You can type in one letter. That's still okay for a string. They can hold multiple letters. They don't have to. Okay. What else? So let's start looking at these. So for the given input, so 6.4.1, indicate what string will be put into user string. So if you do user string equals str dot next, which reads one word, if they type in ABC, you're going to get ABC. Now, do we need to type the quotes here? Let's find out. No, we don't need to type the quotes. So if you type in ABC, then user string will be ABC. Okay. If they type in hi there, what will happen? Well, they just want you to understand that scnr.next reads one word, not the whole line, one word. So hi there is going to give you the hi. Oops, capital H. Okay. Hello, I'm tired. What will be returned? Everything before the space. So hello with the exclamation point. What about here? So notice they left this all blank at the beginning, but we saw that next is going to ignore that. And when you read one word, if they type in very fun with spaces at the beginning, very is going to be what you get. And that is what am I saying? That's what scnr.next does. Now, what if you do multiples of them? You're going to get a first string and a second string. So we saw this with my name, right? So, and we want to know what's going to end up in a second string, by the way. That's what it says. So first string, second string is going to be the first word and then the second word. So my, right? That's going to be the second word. What's the second word here? Well, it's going to be Sinatra. The point of this is that here the second word and the first word are on the same line. Here the first word and the second word are on separate lines. That doesn't matter. It's still second word is my, second word is Sinatra. Okay. Same thing here. Spaces, white space. Look at all the white space, right? That's the empty space here. That doesn't matter. So the first word is O and the second word is no. Again, we're still looking at next. We haven't looked at next line yet. What about this? We all know. Sounds ominous. But what's the second word, right? It says second word, all. Third word would be no, but they didn't read three words. They only read two. Okay. I'm going to skip this. Now this one is next line. So next line. So that reads an entire line at once. So if you type hello there, welcome, what is the first string going to be? It's going to be the entire first line. If you type in I don't know, what's going to be the first string? I, right? The whole entire first line. This one says second string, sneaky. So what's the second string? Hey, buddy, what's up? What's up, right? What about this? Blank line A, B, C, D, E, F. Notice they want you to make sure you understand that the top line is blank here. So what's the second string? Well, first string is going to be the top empty line. Remember that next line can give you empty lines. So you're going to get an empty line first and ABC second. Now, if you do this with a bunch of spaces at the beginning, what did we see with next? So remember how next worked was way up here. When you had next, the beginning spaces get chopped off, right? Because next just wants to read a word. But when you do next line, you get the entire line, whatever you typed. So if there's spaces at the beginning, then there's going to be spaces at the beginning when you read it. Okay. All right. Maybe, whoa. Do a couple of these. So everyone is great. That's right. And we're reading sometimes with next and sometimes with next line. So if somebody says, if you do str1 equals next, str2 equals next, that's going to read one word and one word. So the first word's going to be every. the second word is going to be one, right? So what goes into str2 should be one. Easy. Now, this right here, what does the following get into str2? And this is where you need to remember that thing that I said here. Pitfall. After next, a leftover new line may cause next line to return an empty string. That's exactly what this is. So, actually, I think it is. Um, oh no, never mind. This is not quite, we're not, I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, so here, if you read scnr.next, that's going to read the first word, every. And then when you do scnr next line, it's going to read one, including that space that's after every. So it's this last one, but it has a leading space, right? So when you're reading one word at a time, you don't get any spaces, but when you're reading next line, you get spaces. So you get that extra space there. Okay. Now this one, next line, and it's string 0, string 1, string 2, and they want to know about the last one. This is where that thing that I said earlier matters. So when you do the first SC&R next, you get every. When you do the next SC&R next, you get one, but there's still an enter, right? A new line at the end of this. And so when you try to do SC&R dot next line, you end up just reading the enter at the end of this line, which is dumb. Like it seems weird, but that's what happens. Um, so it's just a little tricky. What's this do? Next line, next line. Okay, so here what they're doing is they understand what the issue is. When you do next and next, if this next is at the end of a line, then you do next line, you're going to end up reading an empty line, right? So what they've done is this temp string, TMP for temp, um, that's the one that's going to read an empty line. And then the next one will actually be on the next line. So what they're trying to do is use next to read every, use next to read one. Then they want to read the next line, but they can't. So they read this enter first with that temp string, this line. And after they're done, then they read another line. And when you read the next line, then you'll actually get is great. So it's a bit tricky there, but that's what they're doing here. So, I mean, this is fine. You can do the last couple yourself. Let's do a couple of these representing text. So some of these are going to be pretty simple. I'm going to jump ahead pretty quick. So system.out print line in. I think, of course, it's going to print an in, and it's a print line, so enter. Cool. Skip to 4. Oh, okay. So string str1 equals scnr next, and they type in D, and then they print out string 1. What's going to get printed? The D. Okay. Maybe they're not that hard. Let's go to 7. Okay, this one's going to be the one where we have a little bit of work. So lion, yak, bee, dog, owl, elk. All right, what happens? So you just have to trace your way through. When you do SC&R next, that's going to read lion. When you do SC&R dot next line, that's going to read yak, but it's going to read yak and it's going to read the space in front of yak. So when you do next line, it doesn't delete those spaces. So you're going to get yak and a space. So when you print line str1, it's going to print out lion. And it's a print line, so we go down to the next line. And then when it tries to print str2, it's going to print yak, but with a leading space. So it'll be space yak. And then an enter because it's print line. So basically, this is seeing if you understand that next line is going to not be yak by itself. It's going to be yak with this extra space at the beginning. Bit tricky. And if you get it wrong, it'll tell you why, and you can try to improve next time. Alrighty. Um, so this is pretty straightforward here. I don't know if everybody's is going to be the same or not, but it says write a program that reads a person first and last name separated by a space, assuming the first and last names are both single words. So that means when they're telling us they're single words, right? That's telling us that we don't need to use next line um, because there's no spaces to worry about. Like they're going to type in Maya Jones, and Maya is their first name, and Jones is their last name. So we don't need to read that all in one variable and do something complicated. We can just read Maya is the first name and Jones is the second name, and we can do it with next, not next line. So all you're doing here when it says reads a person's first and last name separated by a space, uh, separated by a space, we don't really need to care about. We just need to read the first name is going to be SCNR next, the first word they type, right? Use SCNR next to read one word. Their last name is also a word, SCNR dot next. We do not have to worry about like the extra space going into their last name. We don't because that was an issue when you're using next line, not when you're using next. So this will read their name properly. First name, last name will be first name Maya, last name Jones. And then we just want to print it out like this. So to print it out like that, I think that should be easy, right? Because you have been printing stuff out since the first week. So we should know that if you want to print their last name, you would just type last name plus, and then we need to print out a comma and a space. So you do plus, comma, space, like that. So you in quotes to print out the comma and the space. And then we want to print out their first name, which is stored in the variable we called first name, just like that. Okay. So we won't do all of these. Maybe we'll just jump to level 2 and do whatever level 2 is. Am I on level 2? I guess. Um, read the string variables person name and birthplace from input. Okay. Assuming that the person's name and birthplace may contain multiple words. Okay. The first line contains the person's name, and the second input contains the birthplace. All right. So their name has spaces in it, and their birthplace has spaces in it, right? So we can't use next because next reads one word at a time. We have to use next line. That way we can read their entire name and put it into a variable, and we can read their entire birthplace and put it in a variable, even if there are spaces. So this is really a lot like what we just did. So we're just doing person name equals SCNR dot, and we want to read the whole line. So we'll just read the whole line. That'll be their name, Guy Hunt. Um, then we need their birthplace, which is also an entire line. And we don't have to print it out because look, they're printing it out. Person name is from birthplace. So we just have to do what we did. And we got it. Simple as that. So we had to realize that we wanted to use next line and not next. And that was really the hardest part there. That's about it. We can do the last one. Yours might be different, of course. let's see, read the string variables term year, course 1, course 2, course 3, assuming that the term contains multiple words and each course is a single word. The first input line contains the term, and the second input line contains the courses. Okay, so they're going to type it this way. Here's what they're saying. They're typing it like this: Spring 2016, genetics, ethics, entomology. Okay. But then they're saying the term somewhere contains multiple words. So all of this entire line is the term. But for the courses, this goes into one variable, this goes into one variable, and this goes into one variable. So what they're saying here, and you should understand this from the description, is that the term, which contains multiple words, that is going to be read with next line. However, the courses, which are just one word each, those are going to be read with next. So to read one word at a time, we use next, but to read the entire line, we use next line. So what does that mean? It means that the term year, we need to use SCNR dot next line because it's multiple words. However, course 1, course 2, and course 3, each of those is one word, and so we would just use SCNR dot next. So for a course, you just read one word, and we just need to do that 3 times, one for course 1, one for course 2, one for course 3. And hopefully that makes sense. And this should just work. And it did. Um, that's it. All right. So we're going to stop here in a second. Um, we can think about this. This is going to be talking about how to think about debugging your program. And so this is really just kind of something to read. You don't have to do a lot to it. Just kind of read it and think about it a little bit. And then for the style guidelines on the next section, again, you want to think about how to type things. Um, this is just style. This is stuff that Java will not enforce, but you want to try to think about. And so you can do this on your own, but basically, this is good. X equals 25, Y equals X plus 1. This is bad. X equals 25, Y equals X plus 1. Okay. So these are just examples of basically good ways to do things and bad ways to do things. So like I would not separate these into separate lines or like spaces between them. You usually put spaces to separate things when they are conceptually different. That's why if you look at my code here, you can see that the way the code is structured is first I had my scanner, then I had my strings being read in, and then I had my strings being printed out, and I'll separate them by a space or two uh, to visually separate them. It makes it easier to read. If you put them all next to each other, that's confusing because it's harder to figure out what's doing what. And if you separate everything, that's also kind of hard to read because you can't really see that, you know, these two lines at the bottom are the same and these two strings are the same and the scanner is separate, right? So you kind of want to group things together that seem like they should go together. Um, some of this stuff about indenting is going to be a lot more relevant in the next lecture when we actually start looking at how to write these if statements. And we'll talk about how to do braces and stuff too. But you can just kind of, again, try to read this and absorb it. And that's going to be it for now. So I'll talk to you guys later. And in the next lecture, we will talk about if statements. All right, that's it for now.